Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A. Hopefully, you're all having a great Tuesday so far. We're going to get into all of your guys' questions for tonight's show, so make sure you keep firing in your chats into the chat room. We have quite a few already in there, so we're going to try to get to everybody's throughout the night. We're also going to be starting our series now, since it is December and the year is wrapping up. We're going to be starting our series of recaps for 2025 that we do every year. And then, of course, looking forward to the next year. So we're going to start with the most exciting piece of Star Wars always, which are movies and TV. And since we didn't have any movies this year, we're going to be talking about and ranking our favorite Star Wars TV shows of the year. So we got three main ones: Andor Season 2, Tales of the Underworld, and Visions Volume 3. But I also threw Skeleton Crew in there because last year when we were ranking it, we hadn't seen the last 2 or 3 episodes. So we can now kind of add the complete product of Skeleton Crew to the 2025 list of Star Wars movie and TV, even though it feels like a very long time ago that show did release. So we're going to talk about all those, to give kind of a retrospective on everything now as the year is starting to close, and take your guys' questions and anything you guys want to say about all of those, as well as taking your guys' comments and questions and anything you'd like to ask in the chat. It's just going to be kind of a free flow, fun conversation about everything from the year. So we'll kind of intermix your guys' questions and any other questions you have in between talking about each show. And we'll go for a little bit longer. We'll do probably closer to the hour and a half long show tonight rather than the hour long show. So looking forward to all that, but make sure you hit the like button. More people are watching right now than have liked the stream, so make sure you do that. It does really help out our streams, helps us get out to more people. And subscribe for more content like this. Keep an eye out on the channel for more videos. We've been posting a lot of that program, and see if you would like to join for as little as 99 cents. There's also other perks that you can get for live streams. So if you're interested in the live aspect of the channel, check those out as well and see what's right for you. If you're watching on replay, make sure you comment your thoughts on the stream, and also make sure to join us every week. Every Tuesday, we go live to take your guys' questions and talk Star Wars. All right, let's get into the stream right off the bat here. And so we do have a lot of comments, and the way I'm thinking I'm going to structure the stream tonight is just purely, let's talk about one of the shows, and then we'll move into some comments, and then we'll talk about another one, move into comments, and just kind of keep switching off. So let us know what your guys' thoughts are. And if you have questions that aren't about the Star Wars shows of 2025, that's also okay. Keep sending those in. We'll get to as many as we can. We usually do first come, first serve for chat, but also we try to limit it to like 2 consecutive questions per person at a time. So we'll answer 2, go to the next person, and then once we cycle through the chat, we'll go back up to the top and answer as many people as possible. And of course, Super Chat guarantees you get on the stream. Let's start a discussion tonight talking about Skeleton Crew. It feels like forever ago that Skeleton Crew came out, and it kind of was. We only got a few episodes in 2025, but we did rank it last year when we did this same stream for 2024, with the caveat of, we'll probably return to it for 2025 because it hadn't finished yet. So now we are truly almost a year away from Skeleton Crew having wrapped up. And it's kind of sat with us. The reception has been pretty similar. It did unfortunately fade pretty fast from the Star Wars conversation, and it didn't quite seem to have that second life with other fans who didn't watch it after the show came out. So it is kind of just this like back burner, interesting Star Wars project that if you watched it, great, but a lot of people really don't care about it. Sonic, now almost a year removed for you with Skeleton Crew. What are your thoughts on it still now about a year later? And where would you put it amongst the 4 shows of 2025?
I mean, definitely a fan of it still. It never was something that was going to be upsetting, I think, in my mind, after how Acolyte kind of divided audience attention. And the fact that it was kind of more targeted toward like a preteen audience, more like the Stranger Kids in space audience that they were marketing it as, or like talking about. Yeah, that made a lot of sense to me. And it didn't necessarily have the same depth. It didn't necessarily have the same darkness, but I did like the cast of characters. Obviously, like people have said before, Neil is the standout to kind of take an alien design and make them feel so loving and lifelike, especially one that originates from the original trilogy era, and seeing how you can like kind of boost it up again. I don't know if he's even the same species of Max Rebo. I think there was some discussion about that, but I think they officially said he's not, but he might be like an offshoot or something. Regardless, I found the cast really fun. I still have the same thoughts that I have about like KB, for example. I thought her little mini arc that she kind of goes through of learning to emote, kind of standing up for herself instead of relying on her technology, relying on how much of her personality is based on her cybernetics. I thought, oh, that was good. Jordan Awood, he's a character that I'd love to see again pop up somewhere. I think he very much has a role to play in the Mandoverse, especially when, you have to consider somebody with the Force at this point in time can be used and he can be manipulated, or they can be someone that drives, you know, Thrawn back in his own way in the Underworld or something like that. There's potential for him there. And I think it'd be a waste if we only had Jude Law for this one series because I found him quite fun. I remember like the whole arc of everyone being like, "Oh, he's just gonna be the classic, like, not so good guy, but he'll find his heart of gold by the end." And he didn't. He really didn't. Like he has some regrets at the end about like, "I'm sorry I had to do it to you kids," but he's a villain. Like he embraces it. He's not like some monster of a villain, but he's like, "This is what I've had to be. This is how I've survived, and this is what has gotten me by. So I'm gonna be like this." So I definitely appreciated that aspect of the character quite a bit. I'd love to see more of that for sure moving forward. And he just has to show up in like one episode or something. Like I think if we can see a Cobb Vanth show up and possibly again in the Manaverse a couple times, I think John and would definitely has a place there. I'd love to know more about like the whole system though. Like I think the overall I don't know how to put it, like the brain of the universe being quite literally like basically like a big R2 head on a swivel. I was like, okay, that's cool, that's whatever. But when you're like implying connections to the High Republic, when you're implying connections to things that are uh, more directly connected to an era of Star Wars that has a little bit more freedom and openness. And then you could have seen like what has changed, why the system kind of took place, and all that, making it kind of just seem like security protocol is the only reason that they've kind of kept up with this system, and that's why everybody's kind of been assigned or trained from birth into these roles. I found okay when it came out. It just found it being a little boring, especially when you take into consideration it's like, well, it's not just this one planet. It's not just their home planet now. It is all these other planets that are in the system that have to have something similar to this. That these that are all connected. And I think we brought it up back then in the day. Like it feels like a strange way, like almost like the Corellia system in those old Corellia trilogy books with Dragon Cell Solo. There is something almost man-made about the whole thing, and not necessarily the planets being moved in place, but something about, like, how it's put connected and how and why things have to be in secrecy in an era where there should have been flourishing in a lot of ways. So, pretty fun. I know we didn't get like we mentioned, we didn't get to have the last couple episodes, so definitely appreciated the finale, right? Like, I liked how polished it looked. There was actually quite a bit of fun action. I felt like everyone's arcs reached a pretty good conclusion. It was nice. It was good, and I love seeing, like, the B-Wings and everybody kinda come in, seeing that this is a show that got delayed for a year, possibly got some a little extra touch-up too, because that finale looked very polished from the effects side of it. So, yeah, it's definitely something that after it came out, I didn't really have an interest of kinda going back to watching an episode or 2. It definitely does feel like one of those miniseries that is just like an extended movie, and this could have been, like, summarized in, like, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and gotten kinda the same point across. But I do feel like this is a great, like, holiday show because I have definitely felt that pull more recently to be like, "Oh, I just wanna see, like, what these cast of characters are like, what they're up to and all." And, yeah, I'm hoping, post Mandalorian Grogu, if we have something post Ahsoka season 2 that they can show up there. If not, I think this cast of characters should at least continue in animation, should have some books. They should be a nice little fun offshoot. Just abandoning them right now I think it's a mistake. If you have to only use Jordan Nowod because it's of Jude Law's stature as an actor, I understand that, but at least giving the kids a cameo and then letting them kind of have their own pocket universe, I think is the best way to kind of move forward with this. So yeah, for me, I'd put this as like my third place.
Yeah, it's a show that feels weird to talk about now, but 2025, if you include this, is honestly a sneaky good year for Star Wars TV. It feels like we didn't really get anything, and we kind of didn't. We just got Andor, and then a couple short animated shows. But then, if you include Skeleton Crew, like overall, the year was pretty solid and well rounded. And Skeleton Crew offers so many things that are so different for Star Wars, a whole new vibe, a whole new take, but still kind of maintains that spirit of what George Lucas was going for, the fairy tale, the fun. And still with Skeleton Crew, I look on it quite fondly. Now, I think the thing that's unfortunate with Skeleton Crew, and you kind of alluded to it with your comments as well, is that Skeleton Crew often feels like the canon book of Star Wars TV. And what I mean by that is like it has aspirations, but ultimately it's not able to really go beyond what the story itself is because it's holding back from truly connecting everything. Like you mentioned, High Republic connections, Old Republic connections, connections to the larger Star Wars lore, connections to the Mandalorian, connections to the Thrawn plot. All these different things are teased, but the show itself can't really ever go for it. And so I think overall as like a Star Wars product where we want to, get excited about, oh, what could it be tying into? What could it be part of? It ultimately becomes quite forgettable because it doesn't really connect to anything. And I think a lot of this time the show spent building towards the grander picture ultimately was kind of wasted time that it could have used to just push forward with its characters a little bit more because its characters all have good arcs. That's main four characters plus Jod, but I think just a little bit more to each of them, a little bit more emotion, a little bit higher stakes to their stories on top of just, the classic hallmarks of Amblin 80s movies would have been a welcome addition to this type of project just so it didn't feel purely like, oh, we're going to make Amblin Goonies basically with Star Wars. It has a hard time going beyond just being Goonies in Star Wars because it doesn't really take risks. And so ultimately, while a fun project, one that I thought was worthwhile, one that I thought was quite entertaining, that's why I feel like it's not super memorable now a year later. It's the one that I consistently forget came out, even though it's better than some of the other stuff that came out last year, better than most of the stuff that came out last year. It's still kind of forgettable, and that's a little bit unfortunate. But it does have a lot of good cast of characters. If they pop back up, it's going to be, exciting to see them, especially Jod. I think he fits this world and could be a really fun returning character across a variety of mediums. So I would love to see a lot of this come back. I'd be interested in a season two, but it really just doesn't feel like we're ever going to return to it. But overall, the product as a whole, I still have fond memories of watching. It's just kind of like you said, something I've never really gone back to, something I don't necessarily have any desire to go back to. But if one day, years from now, I'm doing a revisit of the Star Wars shows, this is going to be one that I think I'll look on with a little bit of excitement to rewatch because I think it will be, still a good time 5 years down the road, just like it was recently. So I put it as my number three as well. It's kind of a tentative three. It could be four. And again, this is just a really solid year for Star Wars TV. The last two, three, and four are all about the same level to me. But Skeleton Crew being live action, being a little bit more fun, being a little bit more experimental, different. I put it as three. So I thought it was a good time. But what do you guys think? Let us know in the chat. D. Karras says Skeleton Crew gets bonus points for Neil and extra bonus points for Neil's wistful, lovelorn look with the wind blowing in his tuft of hair. And then says not nearly enough bonus points though to get within reach of Andor, but still love the show. Plus, did I mention it's got Neil? And that's kind of how I feel too with the entirety of 2025. It feels like all we got was Andor, just because it was our only big, huge budget, AAA blockbuster show. And it was so much better than everything else we got, even though the rest was pretty good. it was so much better than everything else we got that it's hard to even remember anything else from 2025. So I'm with you there, D. Karras, and also D. Karras says rewatched it a couple of weeks ago. I love it as a breezy watch. The score is great. It better be careful to not choke on its own aspirations. And yeah, I think that's right where it fits. It's Star Wars is going to now have, as we've talked about, if it wants to keep going and make a bunch of different types of things, you're going to have a lot of skeleton crews. You're going to have a lot of those fun, good time passer shows. You didn't dislike watching it, but ultimately, 5 years, 10 years down the line, when Star Wars has 20 shows, you're not going to be thinking of it amongst your favorites. But to some, it will hit those notes and last for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like to point out that DK Cars kind of really talking about this being within reach of Andor. It's like, yeah, like of course it can't be, right? Like not nearly enough because well, one, it's not like a show that you remember as a 25 show. It just has to be included in this because it didn't conclude in 2024, right? So yeah, it kind of sucks, especially with knowing that the show, like I mentioned already, was delayed a whole year into 2024. It was supposed to be a 23 release, so if people are always like memeing and make fun of the show of Stranger Things with like, oh, all the actors' kids now look like they're like Adam Sandler and everybody else and grown-ups. I'm like, well, first of all, that's an overreaction because the teenagers, the original batch of them, were all in their 20s. Same basically age here for now this cast that is portraying basically the same age of their older siblings and the like. So yeah, I mean stuff like that really kind of gets in the way, and that has been a big issue with streaming in general. Like it's lovely to have this high budget, but a cast of characters like this really needs to be able to grow with it, right? It needs to have like a Harry Potter-esque situation where it's like every year, there's a new movie because a book is being written every year before that movie comes out, or they at least have a shooting script comparison of sorts ready for them to start working on, right? And yeah, I mean, there are things that I wish, like especially the later Harry Potter books, could have pulled more from the books or like more elements that I feel are just floating because of runtime issues and all that. And that's where the miniseries format theoretically should be better. But again, you have to do it yearly. You have to make it so like these characters grow with us, right? Like another big example of that right now is the whole Percy Jackson show. It's been 2 years, right? Two almost closer to three now since its first season came out. And people are like, "Oh my god, the kids like the voice change is insane, right?" It's like now that and they're like, oh, like 5 inches taller and all that, and yet this is supposed to be like 7 months later after the first book release, or like a year later, right? And I mean, I read Percy Jackson back in middle school, but for me, it's, like, not necessarily, like, the age every year had to happen, but, like, it just had to feel like progression, and now the big thing with streaming shows with these younger casts is that it feels like jumps, right? In a show like Stranger Things, you can get away with it a lot more because 80s nostalgia, it's very much to be in the 80s to kinda be like this, to have these big jumps. But you can't do that for most shows. You can't do that for most IPs. So I think that really hurts it. I mean, for specifically, like when we talk about like Fern and Wim, right? These are characters that I think are like the foundational pieces of their group, right? We got KB and Neil kind of having their standout episodes or little arcs, but Fern and Wim, I kind of want to see them immediately see like what happens after a couple years. Are they closer? Are they spread apart? Like what has changed now that the New Republic is aware of their system? And like, are they doing more stuff around the system? Are they now part of the New Republic? Like these are things that I want to see them kind of as the two group leaders and that the influence they have to really push forward. We don't get to see that with this type of show, unfortunately, and especially with how the first couple episodes were paced, how much more slower and deliberate it was without having like an explosive second half. Besides, you can argue the finale, right? That does hold it back, and it's a shame too because like this cast has like Carrie Condon, which I mean you probably don't know that name in 24, but in 25 after F1 and everything, you're like, yeah, okay, like this is a pretty like strong cast of adult actors here, right? But like we talked about then, and I still have the same exact feelings. Reducing them to not having a role in the mystery, like if you're really gonna make that Stranger Things comparison, you need to have everybody kind of analyze, kind of like stumble upon something about the greater mystery, and not have it just be like, oh, it's fully on the kids, it's fully on Jod. The parents are just gonna be around like that. Like it was still disappointing then. It's definitely more disappointing now thinking back at like how for them their arc really culminated in playing a baton pass, like a 4x400 relay to get their little droid up into the atmosphere so they can make signals for their kids, right? Like that's essentially what their main story arc is. Like, yes, Fern and Wim's parents show up in the finale and do some stuff there, but there's nothing for them. I think that's one of the biggest disappointments of the show. If you had just given them something continuous that we'd always check in on, like what's happening on their home planet, all the way into the end of the finale. So even if they don't solve anything, they at least have things that they can help their kids with, more so than just like, oh, let's be more adventurous, let's be more open, let's stand up for what's right. Then I think the show easily could have pushed for like a two. It had that potential. It's just you left a whole grouping of people to the wayside, and that always kind of sat wrong with me. I'm like, oh man, like that's something I really wish this show could have hit on the nail, because I thought the kids, were good for kids. I thought Jude a lot delivered quite well. I thought the intrigue of it was there. I loved the character design, production design, creature design. The parents were just disappointing, and if you had just given them like an acceptable version of the story, I think people would be talking about Skeleton Crew all the way up to Andor, instead of just like, oh, the finale came out a couple weeks go by and then it's already forgotten.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that would have added to the weight issue that it kind of was missing. But yeah, overall, Skeleton Crew, solid show, fun time, and something to remember, at least when having this 2025 retrospective. We're going to dive into your guys' questions now for a few minutes, and then we're going to get to Andor season 2, which is the next show we'll talk about. So keep sending in anything you'd like to ask us. It doesn't have to be Star Wars related, it doesn't have to be related to the shows of 2025. Send us in anything you would like to ask. And just at the bottom, I see Jedi Order 17 says, when are you guys going to do your next movies and TV show tier list? Probably, I don't know. We haven't talked about it. We usually only do it when big releases come out, but probably Mandalorian and Grogu around there, I would imagine. So check out or expect one in 2026. I am sure we will do one in 2026 because of how much stuff is coming out. So
Oh yeah, oh
keep
yeah.
an eye out for that. We've also talked about bringing like the top 10 format back. So you can maybe expect to see probably not all of them ranked because that would be a really long video. And I did that on my other channel. Um, and even by myself, it was still an hour and 15-minute video. So if you want to check out my rankings over there, you can in that format. So we would probably do, if we do that in a top 10 style or, that type of ranking style, either top 10 shows, top 10 movies, or just ranking the shows or movies individually. Something like that could be in the cards as well for us because there are a lot of Star Wars things now. I believe right now there are 33 or 34 main Star Wars movies and shows. And after next year, we're going to be adding 2 new shows and a new movie, plus another season of Ahsoka. So it's going to be a big year for Star Wars. So keep an eye out on the channel, and we'll let you guys know. But if you want to make sure, if you want to vote for that as one of the tier lists, join our Patreon or YouTube membership programs. All right, back to the top. Brandon Tran says, thoughts on the news for Ahsoka season 2 that actress Claudia Black won't return as one of the Great Mothers in Ahsoka season 2 due to not being paid enough. Yeah, this was a smaller story that broke over the course of the week, and it sucks. I love continuity. I'd prefer seeing her back. Um, it's a role that, doesn't have to have her, especially because it's so makeup driven, and she herself looks far younger than the Great Mother is supposed to look. So it's kind of one of those character roles to where the person under the makeup isn't going to get the credit they probably deserve for bringing that performance to life. I wonder if this means, I read her quote and it was, like you said, kind of about money. It was just kind of about the fact that last time they shot it and mostly all in LA, and she lives in LA, and this time they were going to have to relocate all the actors to London, and the amount they were offering her, with the fact that she'd have to pick up her life and her family and go to London for 6 months or whatever it is to shoot the show, wasn't quite in the cards for her, with the lifestyle change that would have to occur as well. And that's completely fair for both parties, I think, but it does suck to not have that continuity back. But I wonder if this means also the character and the characters of the Great Mothers just don't necessarily play as big of a role. And it still remains to be seen what Thrawn's specific plot will be in this season, and how big that plot will be, and what will that plot be in conjunction to whatever Ahsoka and Balin and Sabine are doing. Right? There's a big disconnect between the two stories this season, which concerns me. But if the show does focus a little bit more on Ahsoka, you would think maybe the Great Mothers themselves wouldn't really be as involved. So it would also make sense for Disney, I guess, as a company to be like, we only want to pay the Great Mothers so much if they have, 4 appearances in 2 episodes. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, it sucks to not have that continuity.
I mean, I didn't even know it was her, honestly, with the makeup and everything that she had. That this is like one of those roles where you don't ever love to see an actor have to like be replaced. Obviously, this is one of the more notable shows in the streaming era that have to have like a lead character replaced because unfortunately, we're gonna have Rory take over the role of Balin. So, there's some continuity with that friendship that was there between the two actors and all. But yeah, I mean, that's already something we're gonna have to swallow. So I think this in comparison will be not much to really worry about, especially when it's somebody that you don't even know, like with their claim to fame because of their makeup. Like if we saw their face, then people would be like, "Oh, this is Claudia Black." But most people are almost like finding out that she was in Ahsoka because of her reveal that she's not going to come back. Um, Again, it's a shame. I'm not gonna say that I didn't want her back. Like I always want people back, but this also does kind of come off a bit as like a pleasant way of industry talking this whole situation. I know she's talking about her schedule and like stuff like that, but it does seem a little bit about pay and the moving and all that. She's talking about her kids, but her kids are actually like all 18 and older, so it's not like it'd be something like they're, like, in their development stage, like, if anything, most of them probably are off to college or their final year of high school, and I get it, if that's your priority, you wanna make sure your kid gets, their best grades, a good application in, that's fine, I'm sure, but this this does kinda come off to me at least a little bit of, like, well, maybe she didn't really get the little bump that she was expecting, and with everything that we're hearing about the show being actually cheaper to produce in Pinewood than it was in LA with a more volume-based show. Again, that is something that when you read that like headline, like there's gonna be less of a budget for Ahsoka season 2, that does almost cause a little bit of a worry, especially with the fact that, well, hey, Thrawn's on Dathomir now, and we're gonna probably see a lot more of Ezra and Hera with the New Republic Defense Fleet and like setting up all those pieces. But then you have to consider like a lot of these assets are going to be reused and just modified or increased a little bit from like the huge digital library that we have under ILM and everything, and all the practical sets that can be reused for specific ships and all. There's probably things maybe in Mandalorian Grogu is kind of functioning and providing this to this second season because they were already working on post production so early for that. This being in Pinewood, I mean, they have decades of Star Wars experience, right? And the most recent thing for them being the sequel. So I'm sure they have a lot of the same talent and all that, which, no offense to somebody working the volume, but I think Pinewood has its reputation for a reason. The people who work there are the best of the best. So, and, frankly, in London and the UK, they pay less to their workers there than they do here. So, all those things kind of factor up that, like, if this is like the one piece that you're losing, that this wasn't forced, I don't think people are gonna like worry too much about it. And she also has like it's not like it's even her voice per se either. It's very modulated as one of the great mothers. So yeah, not fun to hear, but this is definitely something I think most people will not even have an inkling of noticing. I do anticipate seeing how people react to the Bale and Skull recast, like if people even will recognize it, because there's so many franchises where people get recasted in TV shows, in movies that people are like, oh, that's a whole different person. I did not realize that. This is not like a Game of Thrones situation where like you see someone who's blonde with short hair suddenly have come back with long hair and a mustache, like as one of Daenerys's like supporters and stuff like that. So I don't think we're gonna have that sort of issue with this. Again, not happy about it, but this one with everything, with all the shifts that are happening for season 2, I don't know if they necessarily lose the role of the Great Mothers, but maybe they're one part of a bigger assembly now instead of just the three of them, which makes the roles of each of them maybe even individually a little less now. So this felt like a trade off that I think Lucasfilm was kind of willing to do. So I get it. I do. I don't love it, but hopefully the rest of the show can compensate for some of these absences and changes and elevate it like every Filoni season 2 usually does.
And I think Dathomir will play a role in this season because of where last season left off. It's just a matter of whether the Great Mothers themselves really do much in this story. I want to see them continue to be involved because I think it's a cool aspect to bring in, but we shall see. But yeah, thanks for the question, Brandon. Jedi Order 17 says, "Where'd you get that blue background from? It's really cool." I assume you're talking about the one in the thumbnail. It's just a Star Wars hyperspace image. So I did a Google search for it a long time ago. I've been using it for a while. So, but yeah, you could probably find it yourself on Google. It is pretty cool. I really like it. I think it works well with a lot of bigger images as well. So thanks for noticing. Brandon says, "Do you think for Avengers Doomsday trailer that drops when Avatar 3 comes out, we could see a mix of flashbacks for Fox X-Men movies and MCU like Infinity War?" Yeah, it's very possible. We're gonna see pretty much all the Fox X-Men, I would assume. I think the way the trailer goes is, pretty classic teaser vibes. I think it's gonna be a lot of shots of the characters we've been seeing recently, like all, depressed and sad and looking like, oh no, they just lost. And then it's gonna have maybe a few shots of somebody like Patrick Stewart or Ian McKellen, or just a team shot of the X-Men. I think it's going to focus on pretty much everybody they've revealed already to be in the movie. Like, I would be pretty surprised if they show a shot of Hugh Jackman or a shot of Tommy McGuire or show a shot of any of these other people who are rumored to be in the film, which, if we're being honest, everybody's going to be in this movie. Like, anybody who's been in a Marvel movie within the last 15 years since the MCU has started will be in this movie. And anybody who, or maybe not Doomsday specifically, but one of these two movies, they'll be in one of the two. And probably almost anybody who's ever been in a Marvel movie in general will be in one of these two movies. So I wouldn't put anybody out of the question, but since the chair reveal thing focused so much on the X-Men, I would be shocked if they don't show at least the big heavy hitters. Personally, I just really want to see James Marsden because I want to see what he looks like in probably a more traditional Cyclops costume. So that would be pretty cool. But I want to see some of those X-Men. And I think the whole thing ends with obviously your shot of Doctor Doom. So that would be the most likely scenario. But yes, if they do make it a little longer teaser, like I still think this is gonna be a teaser regardless. But if they make it a little longer teaser, like a 2.5 minute trailer, they could incorporate, some type of voiceover and some of the lines from those X-Men movies and kind of a montage showing the buildup of Marvel basically from X-Men or even from Blade all the way to Doomsday and pretend like everything we've made has been building to this, because that's what they're going to do, is pretend that that's was their plan all along, right? And if they've written a good enough movie, it'll work that way. But I would be shocked if we don't see the X-Men, but I think you could be right, Brandon, that we could have some type of montage through the history of Marvel movies as kind of that build up with some famous lines from across the X-Men slash MCU, probably some of them coming from Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, and then they flip it at the end and they're like, here's Robert Downey Jr. again, but he's actually not Iron Man anymore. He's Doctor Doom.
Yeah, I definitely can see a lot of this playing out like that. I think one thing that this teaser has to do differently than the Infinity War one is that this is not a linear, storytelling phase, right? We've had so much of it being in the movies, but a lot of it also be straight up better in the TV shows with Loki and all that. And Loki, fundamentally is going to be a pretty big part of this whole saga. So if anything, these teasers, yes, they can rely on the nostalgia and like show clips of these characters, and then maybe like a quick couple shots, new shots of them, brought back to future day, um, or to the present, right? But I don't know. I'd want them to almost do something that like is like Loki is our foundation. Here are all the players, right? Just quick shots of everybody, and then end with the Von Doom, right? Like, yes, I think we could show clips kind of like the old X Men, but if you could show the old X Men in like a glimpse of their suits, I think that'd be more appealing, especially with how '97 is at the forefront of what people think about when it comes to X Men these days versus X2, for example, as great of a movie as that could be, right? But if you see those characters, you're like, oh, that's that actor from those Fox X movies with the '97 look. You'll be like, oh my god, what is happening? Now I'm sold. Is this someone's going to definitely type up like, is are the X-Men '97 characters showing up in Doomsday? Right? Like, is it going to be this version? Or like, you want this trailer to connect as many dots as possible without it being a full nostalgia fest in my mind, right? And you can get the nostalgia just by simply having them there in their suits and their whole look for the get up for this film, right? Uh, Definitely need to highlight your leaders. I think I want to definitely see Sam Wilson kind of be a big role in this teaser. At least have him running with a couple of people, just reminding people like, hey, yeah, he's gonna have his Avengers team build off camera, sure, but it's probably gonna be built up of a lot of people, so let's like try to insinuate things that we might know or characters that more than likely would fit with his billing because of his experience in phase two, phase three, phase four with all the different characters that he's interacted with. Um, Love a couple quick shots in the new Avengers too, the Thunderbolts, and yeah, I mean we don't really have to go crazy into what the villains are like. That's the thing that's like really been hidden away. Like we know Doom is going to be there, but is this really going to be a trailer where we have to necessarily see like multiple Dooms or like Doom bots or whatever? Maybe I don't know, but I think if you can put this trailer as close as possible to present day with the characters that have been you know eh, in story groups and storylines that are similar to each other are going to converge with each other. You can assemble it that way, get the nostalgia by having the older actors with their latest looks while still keeping them in the present day, and then you end with the Doom. I think that'll work well. I'd love Loki to be the tree and like intertwine everything, and you get to see it through almost his perspective of all these branches that he now has to connect and hold together as this big usurper is like attacking him head on. But, is that gonna happen? Probably not. I just think that if you're gonna do a trailer for this, for a film that's been delayed another 6 months, that's gonna have a full lengthy period of post-production, more than even Infinity War did, more than Endgame did, and they really are pulling all the stops for it. I'd also want, like, Marvel to have way more input on their trailer and put more emphasis on the story beats and how these characters are gonna look like from the start, because the multiverse and the era has been hard to like handle unless you've kept up with everything. It hasn't been the best quality. The best multiverse storyline has happened in a TV show and not in the movies, right? So whatever you're gonna have to connect with the announced cast, make it work. And I think if Marvel has more direct input on it instead of using a third party specifically for these trailers, I could see that really helping them out because they need to build momentum for this over the year. This is not just like oh yeah, no, we got a Marvel movie, this and that. Like, yeah, sure. Fantastic Four came out, got good reviews. Thunderbolts came out, got good reviews. They're slowly building their way up, but you have to continue building. If you just suddenly go back into nostalgia, nuking all of this, it wouldn't be my favorite thing. I'll be honest. So that's the one thing I'm hoping can improve with this trailer. That's the one thing I'm hoping that this trailer just you're going to Avatar, but then you're coming out and you're gonna almost immediately post about the movie and this trailer and that's what the goal. It shouldn't be. It should be almost like they're not trying to usurp Avatar, but they're definitely trying to steal a little bit of its thunder. And with this trailer, that's how I think they should approach it. They got to be aggressive, and if they can do that, great. But more than likely, it's gonna be a nostalgia fest, and with Doom, that should be good enough, I suppose. But I want this to be like them really hitting the pavement. Like let's not be play it safe here. We have to be aggressive. We have to be on the front foot because next year is a do or die for Marvel. and we've had just enough of foundation to really go for it.
I agree, but I also don't think they're going to really show anything too crazy in the teaser because we're still Avatar will be exactly a year out from when
Yeah.
this movie comes to theaters, and so they rarely ever give anything too exciting away in a year before trailer. And I would imagine this movie gets 3 to 4 trailers, especially with Comic-Con next year. I believe D23 is next year. So they're going to have a ton of opportunities to showcase this on top of, Spider-Man coming out next year and other big properties, Mandalorian and Grogu, they could attach a trailer to. Like this is going to be not just a movie itself that they're looking to make a bunch of money on, they're going to also look to continue to prop up their other properties like Mandalorian and Grogu that they might not be as sure about with marketing for Doomsday. So I expect a lot of different stuff from this. And I think with this first teaser, unless they do the full on, like, here's a full sneak peek of the movie, unless they're doing like that with IMAX screenings or some type of special thing, I think the teaser is going to be about 2 minutes and just kind of give you a general sense of who's in this movie and what's the tone, rather than actually telling you anything about the movie itself. But I think you will see a couple shots of cool action scenes, or maybe what they really probably will do and should do is, like I said, the same thing. The montages, kind of montage through Marvel history, show all our new characters kind of standing side by side, showing our new characters defeated and looking sad, showing Robert Downey Jr. in the Doomsday costume. And I think the way you end the trailer is not just with the shot of Robert Downey Jr. in his Doomsday costume, or I mean, in his Doctor Doom costume, but an entire little 5-second snippet of him kicking a bunch of the most powerful Marvel characters' asses. Like he's got Hulk by the throat type of thing. I think you do that, that adds another level to, okay, here's the threat we have, because that's their main thing. I think they have to sell with this specific trailer is the threats, because there's been no threat in Marvel for the last 5 years. There's been nothing to really get that scared of or excited about. Whereas Thanos, they had done a great job of building to that for 10 years. Doctor Doom has had nothing. So they have to really sell the fact that he is worth a 2 movie giant series capper. And so that's, I think, going to be their big goal of this teaser. But yeah, thanks for the question. Let's move on to Andor season 2, and then we'll come back to your guys' questions. So keep firing in those questions in the chat. Let's talk about Andor season 2, which was our second Star Wars show to release this year. It started at the end of April and then finished in the middle of May. Obviously, we all have high marks on Andor season 2. Emmy nominee for outstanding drama, arguably one of the best Star Wars things ever made. And it capped out a series as a whole that really stood head and shoulders above everything else that's been made for Disney Plus Star Wars. And really, I think Clone Wars is the only real competition it has in the TV show realm. And frankly, that would mostly be out of pure nostalgia and just also the fact that I think Clone Wars and Andor are almost completely incomparable because they're so different. So it's kind of just pick your poison. But objectively, and really on a really any merit-based critical scale, it's hard to go against Andor as the best Star Wars TV show of all time, and arguably a top 3 to 5 Star Wars project ever. So there's not too much to add to the conversation on Andor, and even now, 7 months almost removed from season 2 coming out, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, where Skeleton Crew feels like it's been at least a year since that show came out. Andor doesn't feel like it's been a full 7 months since it finished, but it's been over 7 months since it started, which is kind of insane. Even that far removed, I still have all the same fun feelings of Andor. It's still settled in for me. I haven't done a full season 2 rewatch, but I rewatched pretty much every episode as they were coming out, and I've seen a couple of episodes 3 to 4 times each. So I really did get my fill of that season this year, and I still love it. Easily my favorite Star Wars TV show of the year. It's so much better, so far ahead of everything else that's come out this year and almost pretty much any other year besides maybe 2022 when Andor season 1 came out. That there's not much conversation to really be had around this specific show. It's still fantastic and easily the best thing of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it is the best Star Wars show. I think first 2 seasons of Mandalorian maybe had a fighting chance. I would say no still because I think Andor is just a different level of writing and characterization and all that. But it's fair to point out that people don't necessarily love this type of Star Wars. It's not the Star Wars they grew up on. It's not what they're interested in. So I get that. I get that. I really do. But everything about Andor season 2 had an uphill battle, and it managed to not only take all the sucker punches with it being only 4 weeks, with it being squeezed in there, with how you're gonna have to change your, 4 seasons or 3 or 4 seasons planned into just 1 final season, and that's how Gilroy literally approached Lucasfilm, like, "I'm just gonna do the 2nd season, we'll call it and wrap it up." You've got examples of, like, things being wrapped up early that have screwed over the entirety of how people view a product, right? Like, the most famous example of that right now is Game of Thrones. Benioff and Weiss were offered 10 seasons, 10 episodes. They're offered to have showrunners replace them that they could hand select, and yet they were like, "No, no, no, we can finish it up in 2 seasons," which, a couple extra episodes, and they didn't even do that. They reduced the rundown, and they had episodes that were shorter, right? To me, it's still shocking seeing that decision, especially now when we're seeing, like, another big show like Stranger Things end that's had, like, purposefully shorter episodes than its last season, but that's only because that season had, like, episodes in, like, 89-minute market times. This one is averaging 70, 80, and the reception for the first half has been quite solid. So it just hurts, right? But then, how Gilroy approached it, just fantastic. He wasn't supposed to make this work, and yet just like how is very much credited for making the 3rd act of Rogue One really, really strong, really uplifting that film as a whole, he did the same for this show, right? I think you can make some criticisms about that first arc with the Maya Paul rebels on Yavin. People are like, "These guys are, like, silly and fighting all this and that." But then when you see, like, the history of guerrilla groups, when you see politics around the world and some of the dumb things that are happening, you're like, yeah, why wouldn't a bunch of, undisciplined, scared people with, like, different opinions and values not go crazy about stuff like that? That's like one of the arcs that I think has aged extremely well for me. I thought it was silly upon the first watch, but I'm like, no, no, I'm seeing plenty of idiotic things in the world right now, so this actually lines up quite well for me. But everything in that back half is stupendous. I mean, that second to last arc is so good, right? The Gorman Massacre, we've heard about it. We know it's been coming. We've had a version of it recounted in Rebels, but seeing the full Mon Mothma experience, seeing Cyril's, like, tragic, like, heroism, right? And seeing how it kind of fell apart, like how he has to choke out Dedra, how he's like finally got Cassian in his sight, and Cassian just destroys it with one word, like one expressionless look of, like, "Who are you?" Right? Like, I don't know who you are, and that's what his whole character has been built around. What he's been working toward. Yeah, just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic work. Gorman was handled so well, being it so practical too, the weight of it so good. And that final arc, also really good. It really does have to work as, like, a Rogue One transition arc, so there is a little bit of depth I think is missing there, but the spirituality that's kind of been anchoring it that was hinted at in that 2nd arc, um, just so good. Like, you see that final shot of Cassian walking off, and then he sees that little Force healer, like, look at him, and it's almost like he's walking towards his destiny. Yeah, it's very poetic. Everything with the Death Star functioned quite well. The final acts of service from everybody. I was a fan. I really was. I don't know how this show could have ended better. I think the only version of this being better is having 3 seasons or 4 seasons and seeing, like, a little bit more of, like, the missions with K2SO, seeing a little bit more of, like, how Cassian is kind of leaving the shadow of Luthen and leaving, like, the manipulations of all that and becoming more and more of a rebel. Yeah, stuff like that I wanna see. I hope we get books. I hope we get some animation or something to just fill in some gaps. make it even richer because that's the one thing about season 2. It hits every point it needs to. Sometimes the best part about being a Star Wars fan is like living in the space of just, the day-to-day lives of people and just seeing how they slowly change and grow instead of just the big key points like the trilogy films kind of have to deal with. So absolutely loved it. Top of the list by far. It's definitely only improved with a second season, which is shocking to say.
Completely agree. Let's also talk about the other show that came out during Andor season 2. And that's Tales of the Underworld, which was our May the 4th drop this year. Tales of the Underworld's the third season in the Tales of series of Star Wars animated seasons. And looking back at this one, this is one of those that I thought was really good when it came out. I still feel pretty similarly, but it's also something that, as I knew it would when it came out, is something I don't really ever think about anymore when it comes to Star Wars. My thoughts are still about the same. I think it's better than Tales of the Empire, but still a big step down from Tales of the Jedi. I think Tales of the Jedi still, for me, is heads and shoulders above anything else that we've seen from Tales of. But I really like the Cad Bane stuff in Tales of the Underworld. The Ventress stuff disappointed me then. It still disappoints me. We'll see, where that goes in the future. But Cad Bane, I thought his origin story, while cliche and kind of tropey, fit the character really well. And there was a lot of great storytelling done with that character. So I can't remember what I rated it at the time. I'll have to go back and look at that video. I think it's maybe dropped a slight bit, maybe like a quarter point to half point from where it was when I watched it in May, as it's aged, but still a solid season of Star Wars Tales of. This was the one I was going back and forth with Skeleton Crew because I do think I rated Tales of the Underworld higher, but personally, Skeleton Crew being live action, it's like Skeleton Crew hasn't gotten better for me, but they're kind of around the same spot. Skeleton Crew live action, longer show, probably something I'll have a little bit more excitement to go rewatch. Tales of the Underworld. If I rewatch it, probably won't rewatch any of the Ventress stuff and just kind of stick to the Cad Bane stuff. So I put this as my fourth favorite for now, but it really is kind of tied with Skeleton Crew for that third spot.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same feelings because it's just hard to compare animation in general sometimes with live action TV just because of runtimes, how many less episodes are in live action too, but the fact that it's reality, right? It's enhanced by its effects. It's not like an art style that's kind of depicting how these characters play out and how you're supposed to see their expressions, see how the story's played for audiences also matter too. Live action kid shows like a Skeleton Crew still appeals to an adult more so than Rebels or Clone Wars at times, which was definitely TV Y7 TV PG. So yeah, it's a bit hard to kind of judge it at times. That being said, I did like it quite a bit. I was really disappointed by Tales of the Empire. I think it's a fine short, and it's nice getting these shorts every May 4th. I love to see the Tales of happen. I love to see the Tales of the Jedi season 2 kind of happen with the actual original Tales of the Jedi stories, like kind of be told as myths for the Old Republic era, as it was kinda tried to intended to, but the fact of the matter is EU only separated KOTOR and Tales of the Jedi by 30 years, which is just unnecessary, but yeah, I'd love to see that happen. I think Tales of the Jedi still probably is better than Underworld. But Underworld does something that Empire, uh, you know, failed completely to do. It told well-paced, compelling stories about each character, and arguably, the one that people were least interested in was Cad Bane's, and his was arguably the better one of the 2. There's not supreme depth to his story, but it is very interesting to see, like, that he has a foil, that he has a companion that grew up with him and seeing how just life growing up together and them being separated on the opposite sides of the law could shape them and how much of Cad Bane is him, how much of it is just the people he was around with, right? And he's not a character that in quite the same way as like a Han Solo, you don't really need to know his origin too much, right? Sometimes you lose the charm and the mystery of that character if you know too much about their early age, right? Especially when, frankly, they are an archetype until they meet the characters of a bigger story and then get to evolve and grow from that. That's how Han grows and evolves in both the EU and canon. Solo Star Wars story, I love it, but it's not like something I necessarily needed, especially with how it becomes a greatest hits. That was my worry here with Cad Bane. I'm like, are we gonna really get greatest hits version of Cad Bane's upbringing and all the stuff that's iconic to him and his look and maybe his little droid companion and all that? No, no, we got it. Just a couple years, enough time for him, especially being a Duros, to like age up and more into the Cad Bane that we know, but just enough to get like the sensible foundations in and what will change about him. So I thought that was quite good. The Asajj Ventress one, I think I really like it as long as we get a follow-up, right? Like, that's the big thing that's gonna happen here. We don't really know if we're gonna get a hidden path show at this point. I'm hoping we do, but we know for a fact that early 2026 is gonna be Maul Shadow Lord. So, is her story gonna be pushed forward there as, like, an arc, or is that show gonna be very much like a Bad Batch where you're focusing on Maul for every episode and all these different characters that he interacts with? Like, is that the way Asajj's story is told? Through, like, Maul's point of view, through stuff like that happening? I do not know. That is, mm, that's a little tough to say, right? And is there really a needed reason for her to be back? No. I mean, Star Wars has been accused of always letting people live again and again and again, but did she have to come back after how strong her ending was in Dark Disciple? No. It's frankly just that they wanted her around. They no longer treat canon as like everything is truly equal. We've kind of reverted in a lot of ways back to pre-canon, where it's like there are different tiers. They're not overriding the book, which I'm thankful for, and I loved seeing that end of Dark Disciple be the opening point of her arc. But yeah, I was hoping that we'd have a little bit more of a compelling reason for why she's still around, right? Uh, yeah, I'm trying to. What was the kid's name that she's with? I'm totally blanking.
I can't remember
Oh,
either. I have to look it up on IMDb.
let me check
Um,
that. Uh,
but he was pretty
mm,
good. He's a decent little character. And their dynamic works. I think it's just also on top of that, like bringing in the path is something we desperately want to see as well. I think, um, Tails, similarly to some Skeleton Crew stuff, if you want to commit, that would have been a way to commit and like start an interesting plot point. But they kind of dodged that. Lyco is his name.
yeah. Lyco, I liked him. He's the least annoying, like, introduction for any of these animated characters. I think it really helps that he's also less an apprentice for her and more just a companion, and she's already been redeemed. It's a question of what she's gonna do next, right? So I did like what I saw. I really wanna see that dynamic unfolded. So that's why I'm hoping we get a hidden path show where they can actually have them be the focuses and Quinlan kind of pop in and stuff. Like the whole intrigue about like, wow, why can't she be with Quinlan again, like her lover and everything for Dark Disciple, right now that she's resurrected? That is apparently one of the things that's holding her back, and she's not willing to tempt fate quite yet, right? Okay, fine, but let us at least see a little bit more of that, right? Like I wish we already at this point got an announcement that hey, that is the next show we're gonna do. It's just a limited series, like one season show, and I would have been like, excellent. That's probably all I really need for Asajj. It's really probably all I need for Quinlan with the little connections that we have to Obi-Wan Kenobi and everything else with the hidden path. If we do that, great. My one worry is like, you introduced and destroyed the first Inquisitor in this series pretty quickly. You have Asajj seemingly gonna work around the hidden path to help them without directly being involved with Lyco. Cool, but is it gonna be continued in Maul Shadow Lord? I don't know. I really don't see how, like, the darker elements of the Underworld are gonna, like, cross over with Hidden Path, and I fear that we're just gonna have to wait, like, another 4 or 5 years, and that's what's really holding me back. Because, like you said, I'm I don't really see a reason for her to be back. I'm happy that she is because I like the character, and I want her to have as much of a grand exit from Star Wars as possible, and if Dark Disciple isn't grand enough for some people, okay. But if you had told me that, like, instead of this, we had the whole, like, most important like passages of Dark Disciple adapted in like an 8 episodes of a Tales of, like if we made it like a Tales of Dark Disciple or something like that for her ending, or just like a mini series or a special presentation doing Dark Disciple with the animation, I think that would have been more than enough for me. This is like, okay, you have to do something next. So yeah, unfortunately for me, it is a two. It's really straddling what we have there with um Skeleton Crew. There are things that are just missing weight in general, but I was impressed by what they did with Cad Bane, which I think gives it a bit of an edge.
All right, so we're going to go back to some of your guys' comments here, and then we'll talk about Visions Volume 3 to round out our show tonight. So make sure you send in any last thoughts you have to the chat. And if you're watching right now and you haven't liked the stream, make sure you do so. It really does help us out. All right, getting back into the chat, we have Brandon who says, do you think Mole Shadow Lord, if it does well next year, could it be renewed for season 2? I would imagine that their approach to Maul Shadow Lord is similar to the approach they seem to have for Bad Batch, which is that season 2 is probably already greenlit. I think the expectations are lower for these animated shows for how they'll do, and I think they kind of have a benchmark for where they'll go. Season 1 probably will determine whether it gets a season 3, but I think they already have kind of a certain expectation. And with animation, it takes so long to get these things out, and you really have to get going on your production pipeline. And Bad Batch had season 2 out fairly quickly after season 1, so it seems like they had already had a plan for more seasons. I'd imagine with a much more bankable character like Darth Maul, viewership will be probably higher than it was for Bad Batch season 2 and 3. I don't know exactly the numbers for season 1 of Bad Batch, but I would imagine that was really high considering it was a 2021 show and people still were all subscribed to streaming services and at home watching things. So I think if this hits the season 2, season 3 numbers of Bad Batch or higher, they're going to be pretty happy. But I think what we also have to take away from this whole thing too with Maul is that really strong numbers, like extraordinarily strong numbers for Maul Shadow Lord, could possibly not just lead to more Maul Shadow Lord, but actually more Star Wars animated shows. Like, and I think that's what we want to get out of this. And I know as Star Wars fans, we always are looking for more. And personally, I think animation's a place they could give us a lot more. I know it's a small team. I know it's, Lucasfilm Animation or whatever. They don't outsource anything really. It's mostly all in house, and so they can probably only handle so many shows at once. One big show and then your Tales of or whatever. But I do think there's an appetite there for more Star Wars animation. People love it, and it does have a big audience, a big following, even if the viewership isn't necessarily extremely high when the episodes are releasing. And so if Maul is getting big viewership week to week, and it does really well, like much better, maybe closer to Clone Wars numbers than Bad Batch numbers, it could actually mean maybe more animation in the future. But I think if they're planning on making a multiple season show with Maul Shadow Lord, I think season 2 is probably already in production. They just have to do that in order to get the show out. And I think Disney Plus is starting to finally learn from this whole streaming lull between seasons that if you want that viewership to continue, you have to get your seasons out quicker than 2-3 years. And so if they want Shadow Lord to build off of his momentum, if they're smart, they'll have a season out within a year and a half of the first season ending.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, this is a animation show, so there's always like a lower ceiling for it. But this is probably the highest floor that we've gotten out of animation since Clone Wars, right? I mean, the fact that it is a character that had a stupendous return in everything that we saw in season 7 of the Clone Wars. And even today, you'll see edits of Maul, up on Mandalore in the air as he's like floating midway. He's like, "We're all gonna die. You're all going to burn," right? Like he's a character that people want to see as much possible, right? And I mean, people loved when he returned in Rebels too. Like he had some very compelling arcs, and for that show to be his official timeline ending is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, I think it was handled well. But Rebels was a Disney XD show. This was pre-streaming really becoming mainstream. Like we were like a year or two away from that too. So yes, people know about it, but Shadow Lord is probably the nicest middle point for one, reaching the goals that they have for animation while not necessarily having to create so many new assets and everything, and while still having, again, a huge floor raiser like Maul. But two, you have the whole solo question over the character. Like we know about the Shadow Collective, but he is also the founder of Crimson Dawn. We're not supposedly getting a solo 2. We may be getting a Lando movie instead of series now. But yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, sure, but how are we gonna connect the dots of how he, like, brought up everything again? I think what this season at least has the possibility of doing is, setting the stage for all of that. I don't know if Crimson Dawn is completely put together, but we see that he's even talking to Dryden Voss and everybody in season 7 of Clone Wars, so they have plans on building up that character from the start and all that. So I can see it happening, maybe just not to the level that we see Crimson Dawn at in Solo Star Story under Kira's leadership in the comics and during the original trilogy. That being said, we have to also consider like the whole like possible leak of having a Dark Talon sort of character be created, that pink Twilight that we saw. Now it's like, okay, well, how much of this is really going to be about him building up that Underworld with Crimson Dawn, and how much of it is gonna be him focusing on this apprentice, and how much of it is gonna be, like, keeping it calm and keeping it cool when Maul's already been literally force choked and thrown against the wall and beaten up by his master and everything. Like, he's already tried this once to challenge with his brother against Palpatine. He can't really do that again. That's something that's gonna absolutely get him in trouble super quickly. So there's a lot of questions I have about this, and I think that's what's gonna sell this show. The only other things though that I can see that the show can try to handle to ensure a season 2 is kind of being a little bit slower about this. I wanna see some things about, like, the Son of Dathomir comics, like, his initial escape and everything kinda recapped in some sort of way. I think that will allow us to then have some nice momentum really accelerating towards the end of season 1. Season 2, I think, is where the show probably takes its biggest swings and all, and, like, really establishes Crimson Dawn to its fullest, establishes, like, this new apprenticeship, new elements of his character that we've never seen in that story. The thing that I am still a bit curious about happening is, are we gonna, like, have this show by the end of season 2 get him to Malachor? I don't know how you could possibly do that quickly. Like, my worry about that is like, okay, you can have this character, get to that point, but he seems like he's a much older man. Like this is something that happened maybe a couple years before. And then there's the whole insinuation that he's actually faced off against Vader, like in the Legends comics and all that. Or I guess that was a clone, but that he's afraid of Vader and the possibility there too, and he possibly is hunted by some of these inquisitors and all that. And the timeline then stretches. So my worry now is like, okay, how much can you do in season 1? Even if you have a guaranteed season 2 that just immediately picked up next, I feel like you almost have to spread out the timeline of the in between the seasons a little bit closer if this is ultimately going to be that final Maul. And then by the time you get to a season 3, you can do some crazy force visions on Malachor of him seeing his death or seeing a version of him, defeating Kenobi on in Rebels and stuff like that. And that's why he's like driven mad by everything on Tatooine and so confident yet in that final battle. But we don't have any of that, right? So the timeline of this one is the one thing that I think is putting a lot of questions for me because I don't know how much more Maul you can do to like if you're gonna introduce a new character like Talon while still dealing with everything with Crimson Dawn from Solo, while still dealing with everything in Rebels with his character. So I hope this gets 3 seasons. I think it has a good chance to, but I think if it does get to that 3rd season, we're gonna have at least at some point some sort of time skip in between a season.
Yeah, I would love it to be 3, 4, 5 seasons. I think having animation have a show that we can really invest in is not just important to the overall like kind of Star Wars TV ecosystem, but also something we miss as fans, because Bad Batch, while a solid show and one that continues to find audience every day, it seems like more and more people are talking about how they really enjoyed Bad Batch every year that goes by. It didn't quite grab that excitement that like peak Rebels did, and especially peak Clone Wars did. It never really had those moments where we got that like mid-season trailer where you're seeing like Vader or Maul or Yoda or something like that. I think this type of show can grab that. So if you do that, incorporate stuff that ties into the larger canon, incorporate stuff that makes people excited, like a Talon, to see what they're going to do with a plot point and a character like that, connecting especially to the kind of George Lucas vision of the sequels that we got. I think there's a lot of like interesting things about the Mall show that could make this a heavily viewed show. Obviously, part of it's going to be is if it's good. If it's not good, nobody will show up for season two, and that's kind of already the barometer they have with a an animated show. But we've seen nothing but solid animated shows from them, and I fully expect this one to be just as good. But I would love it if they did more than one show at a time. So I think if this has huge numbers, you're more likely to get more than one show at a time from them. Um, Whereas if it's just Bad Batch numbers, they're going to always kind of treat animation as a side project. Brandon says, piggybacking off of that, Maul could be one of the main characters in Shadow Lord, but we could see a lot more characters teased like Rook Cast and the Twilight that looks like Darth Talon. Yes, absolutely, for the future of that show. And then we have D. Karras, and I think this is back on our point when we were talking about Tales of the Underworld, who says Talzin had a whole arc focusing on the efforts she had to go through to try and reinstate a corporeal form. There's no end to the stories of the hoops Palpatine has to jump through to enable him to reincarnate / continue to live. But Ventress just gets you wanna? Sure, okay, but you can't see Quinlan. Done. And then says, but they've brought her back. I like her and I think they can do some cool stuff with her. So fine, let's go. Just didn't love how they did it at this point, anyhow. Maybe they'll fill it out later. Well, they have to fill it out later, Karis, because you and I are on the same exact page. I still am kind of distant from anything that has to do with Ventress. Part of it is how much I enjoyed her death and like the story that she was a part of and the meaning behind it and the character development and all that in Dark Disciple. But the other part is like you're saying, just with Star Wars lore. I mean, a lot of people have come back to life. A lot of spirits have come back, or ghosts have come back through either the light side or dark side of the Force. But with Ventress, it's just never felt like something that they cared too much about explaining. And so until they give us true reasoning for her to why she's back, what her purpose is, I'm going to be kind of distant from any Ventress stories. And so it's on them, basically, in my view, to give me a story that I think was great and compelling enough to say that's all right that they brought her back. Let's see more, because as of now, I'm with you. I want to see more from her. I'm not like anti-Ventress because they've already done the damage of bringing her back. But since they've done that damage, I'm going to look at it as damage until they give us a story that actually is worth her coming back, especially in comparison to the story that killed her off, which right now, I mean, after 4 episodes basically of seeing her, they're nowhere close to justifying bringing back a character who had a really strong end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Karis have a lot of the same feelings there. Like, okay, why is it so easy for her, like, and not so hard for, not and so hard for Taliesin, right? Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, we don't know, right? We simply don't know, and some of that also hurts because the majority of people who read Dark Disciple, or like, or invested in Asajj and her final story, and this being a Count Dooku story with Quinlan, like there were names, big names attached to it, promised as like a very big conclusion. This was marketed as like, hey, this was supposed to be an 8 episode arc in a season 7 or 8 of Clone Wars. It would have been separated in half. You would have come back. This would line up very closely to the end of the war. Like it was supposed to be a concluder, right? So in my mind, still in a lot of ways, I still treat that as the end of the character. I don't really need anything more from it. But I do see some more arguments these days about like she should still be around. She needs something heavier and meatier because as much as I liked it, right, and I liked how they aged up some of the elements in the book to adaptation of that arc, it is very little for Quinlan to, like, have only 1 episode in Clone Wars and then suddenly show up here and kinda have to go through a pretty ramped up version of what we see in Star Wars Republic comics with him and everything under Dooku and the apprenticeship there. Like, one big part of Dark Disciple that I think is pretty fair to criticize is, like, yeah, okay, he falls to the dark side, he's like a sleeper agent, all this and that happens to him. But we never really see, like, a huge amount of time of, like, the training and the missions that Quinlan goes under, with Count Dooku, right? Like, if he is so truly dangerous and so much of a threat, why is it only kinda told passively through Jedi Council and their meetings about stuff, and how does that loop back Asajj, right? We see a lot of the romance between them. That I've never had an issue with, right, and the tragedy behind all of it. But I do find it a little looking back at it now, and yes, I also haven't read in a long time, but that was something I was like, I wanted to see more of that because that was one of the biggest criticisms that you look up on any like EU subreddit or anything. They'll be like, Quinlan's just got his whole Republic arc that was like 50, 60 issues. Now it's like kind of condensed into a little bit here, right? Quinlan is also the master of Aayla Secura, right? In canon and legends, we don't really see anything about that too. So like there are things about Dark Disciple that I think if they had really spent time and make like a season's worth of a show, could have made it a really fantastic miniseries, but they just chose not to. I do appreciate them going for like that opposite perspective of that ending where it's like Quinlan and Obi-Wan are like, oh, you can it's her sisters coming to like gather her, right? Versus what we see in Dark Disciple, which is like, yeah, they're also like she's also like screaming and like saying, I want to come with you, Quinlan, don't leave me here. Like I did appreciate what that beginning was like. I appreciate that we're not cutting across Dark Disciple. But then, yeah, like you said, she suddenly has like, oh, you can come back. I'll get you revived and all that. We don't really see anything about the sleeper that's in the Dathomir waters because it's quite literally supposed to be dead in the last of its species. Like these things that are there for the water of life and all that that are supposed to be important and integral to that character aren't so much so, right? Like at least not in how the Tales format really pushes it. We don't really have any reason to really care about why she can't be with Quinlan, right? Like, let's say, like, the closer she gets, the more she, like, disappears. Maybe she has moments where she's almost, like, ripped back into Dathomir or something, and her body just starts, like, fading or is in massive pain or something like that. If we had stuff like that, great, right? But we don't, and then the fact is that is also now probably the better appearance of the 2 that she's had post Dark Disciple. Her Bad Batch, appearance was something that was so hyped, and then it wasn't really much. We didn't get anything what, her and, like, where her story is going, if she's reunited Quinlan, if she's helping the Path or anything at that point. But 2, I mean, Omega, like, the whole thing is, like, does she have the Force or not? We were just left with, like, she's special, but we're it's not the way that you think is special, right? That's really all that episode was. It's a backdoor pilot for something we hoped was bigger, but it's kinda closer to how we've seen in season 7's intro of having General Grievous and how he looks in on the Invisible Hand in episode 3, that model, that updated version, which was then finally used in the Tales of the Empire to show him commit another massacre or continue to commit the massacre on Dathomir, right? Now, this being a show where, like, yes, there's a little bit more heft and weight to it, but we don't know anything about what more about this Night Sister magic has led to a revival. We don't really know much more about Talzin. There's a whole bunch of Talzin story that's also locked behind Son of Dathomir, which if you've read Dark Disciple, hopefully you've read that too. But there's also plenty of people who probably just don't even consider picking up a comic book. Right? There's a lot about the Clone Wars legacy era that I think they're almost like trying to undo right now. We don't get to see like the Crystal Crisis animatics anymore. Like they're considered canon, but we never saw them used in anything, and they're no longer on the Star Wars website. So it does seem like a very corporate decision in a lot of ways to bring her back. Fine. Star Wars has always been corporate to some level of degree when it comes to merchandise, when it comes to characters. I get that. But let's do something with her, right? Like that's why I'm hoping she at least has like a mini arc or something in Shadow Lord season 1. And if that season does well, then hopefully that's the next show announced that there's a hidden path show with her and Quinlan and Lyco and the Inquisitors chasing them and maybe some cameos from Cal and everybody else. Like, do some cool things like that. If you can flesh out that part of the world and connect some of those dots there and let her have like a season or two, then I think I'll be pretty pleased. And I think I can very much see story reasons be there for her character's revival. But right now, it's like you only really undone some of like the really mixed feelings I had with her Bad Batch appearance, but you haven't really undone my feelings about like why was it so easy for her? Why don't we know more about what's going on with Talzin, and why Dark Disciple couldn't be the end for her character?
Next question is from Critical Thinker, who says, "What did you think of the latest issues of Absolute Batman and DCKO if you've read them?" I haven't gotten a chance to read them yet, but when I do, I will definitely let you know. And then let's wrap up our stream tonight. And again, if you have any last questions, comments, anything you'd like to send to the chat, send them in. But let's wrap up our stream here tonight talking about Visions Volume 3, which is the final 2025 Star Wars show that came out. Visions Volume 3, I thought was a big step up from Volume 2, around the same level as Volume 1. Had a few episodes that were amongst the best of the entire series. But for me, I really enjoyed this. I thought this was probably the most complete set of episodes. It was a really strong season to me, and the return to anime really felt like Visions again, for a lack of a better word. It just feels like Visions and anime belong together. And having things that had such highs, like to me, the dual payback, as well as obviously Black, which I thought was one of the best episodes of Star Wars animation in general, um, coupled with some other really strong new episodes that we got from the series. Thought this was a really, really strong effort from Visions. It made me want a fourth season. It made me want more of certain series like this, like the Duel, the Village Bride, anything like that. I would take more, and some of the new stuff that came from this season as well, I thought lived up to the hype and made me excited to see what could come into the future. So this is the one I've sat with the most recently, as opposed to something like Skeleton Crew or Tales of the Underworld, which has been a while since I've watched them. Admittedly, like Tales of the Underworld, the Cad Bane stuff I think is better than probably 50% at least of Visions Volume 3, but I'd take most of these episodes over the Ventress arc in Tales of the Underworld. And when it comes to Skeleton Crew, uh, I just think Black kind of takes it over the top of almost anything else outside of Andor that we've seen this year. So for me, I had this as my second favorite Star Wars TV show of the year. Really good collection of episodes, a much greater season as a whole than 1 and 2 in my opinion, and some episodes that I will just remember and probably rewatch multiple times over the course of my life. So really enjoyed what was brought to the table here with Visions Volume 3, and hoping we get to see a Volume 4.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of this. This was a nice return to form after Volume 2 kind of being spread out about all these studios across the world. There's also some recent controversy about the short from 88 Studios, the animation studio in India that seems to have simply ripped off some fan films. Whole lightsaber capture, right? Like, and that was one of the better duels, I think, of Volume 2. So that's disappointing to hear about. So after considering all that and what we got in Visions 3, I was like, yeah, I've liked it. I liked all the sequels. Though Ninth Jedi, because it had like, I guess the guarantee of having a show come out was a little bit disappointing in some of its weight. Again, I still love its world building. I still love its visuals. Wasn't a fan of them using CGI for some of the battles, but how beautiful Nine Jedi's battles were in the first short. The duel, I think, definitely improved for me. I like the second one a lot more. I think it sold me on the idea of a duel show. Village Bride, like we were talking about in our review, I think it's a two-parter. I think it's done. I'm happy if it ends here. I wouldn't be disappointed if it continues, but it almost feels like it was intending to wrap up stuff, which was very different than everything else that was happening with the other sequels. All the other shorts I liked. I think the nice thing about this is like there's a stronger floor for volume 3 than anything that we've seen in 1 and 2. One, as much as people like praise a lot about it, I think it was again early COVID, and two, just the fact that it was not a traditional Star Wars release that made people super excited for it. And you want animation to be a place where you can experiment and take these risks. And Volume One certainly did that, but there was just a lot of shorts that were like just not very interesting. That were like, oh, okay, like I'm seeing an Obi-Wan Kenobi story told with the Toby-Wan droid, and it's like, oh, okay, like, do I care about that? Tatooine Rhapsody had a great chance to have really cool music play into a role with the story, but it's not very good, and the chibi effect wasn't great there. All the issues that I had with Volume 1 shorts, I thought similar shorts resolved in Volume 3. I was a big fan of The Smuggler, for example. I thought that was a really good short for me. Bounty Hunters, I thought was also pretty solid. But as a whole, like, the only thing I really care about, frankly, from this volume, more time that we've gone past it, is the black short. The black short is just so good. It's so insane. It's old experimentation. It's all the intrigue of Japanese legendary animators kind of being put together in one room and seeing Star Wars from a totally different angle. I think one thing about Volume 3 that I liked is that it was consistent, but to be fair, a lot of it was stuff that I was somewhat familiar with. There's nothing at all in Star Wars, past or present, that is anything like Black, and that is an incredible short. I don't care if you don't like animation or anime in general, that's something that if you have to touch Star Wars Visions, that should be the only thing you need to watch from that, quite frankly, that is so good. It's so weird too, if you're looking something narratively, it's not there, it's more of like a roller coaster of emotion and feeling out of it, but it's insane, but yeah, I mean, I like it. It is a soft 4th place, it is 2 to 4 are pretty close with each other, to be frank for me, but I just happen to like ongoing animation stories just a little bit more than shorts that are disconnected. And what I got from volume 1 to volume 3 sequels was good, but not super great as I was hoping it would be all around. And I think if the old 3 sequels were like standouts like the sequel was, then I could have seen this really punch up to all the way to second. But for me, the only reason I see Visions Volume 3 this year ended up being Black, and I'm forever grateful we're gonna have something like that associated with Star Wars, but that's also something that I'll throw on, like, a YouTube video in, like, 5 years when someone's re-uploaded on their channel and watch it that way more so than going on Disney Plus, clicking on it because it's not really something that I go to be like, "Oh boy, this is Star Wars, and I can't wait to check out year after year."
Well, let us know what you guys thought of the 2025 Star Wars shows. Obviously, I think everybody's going to have the same number one, but like we had two, three, four, they're all kind of close on the same level of pretty good overall. Let us know your favorites in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching our stream tonight, everybody. Thanks for sending in your questions, for supporting the channel. Really appreciate that. Keep an eye out for more content throughout the week. We will have more videos, fan question, all that type of stuff up on the channel throughout the next few weeks. Next week, we're going to talk about books and the extraneous material from 2025. So make sure you check out that stream as well as taking your guys' comments. So make sure you join us again every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Shorts will also be coming out throughout the week. And we're just going to keep up with all this kind of end of the year wrap up, 2026 build, as 2026 should be a very exciting year for Star Wars. Where 2025 kind of dropped the ball, 26 should hopefully pick it up. So thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe for more, and if you're watching on a replay, comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you all next time.